the other is basically safety training. If you are
Hello, good morning, wakey wakey. It is 6 o'clock on the nose and you bang on time for Morning Prime. It is the last day of May 2023, 31st of May 2023. I trust that you slept easy, you've woken up well. It's another good day, numbingly cold, but we hope that it will be warming up, of course, as the day ensues. Today is Global Today, where we take a critical analysis on matters foreign affairs, diplomacy, and security. I am in the special company of the Executive Director of Amnesty International. This is Irungu Houghton. Also, we have with us this morning Dr. Hassan Kaneje, who is the Director of the Horn Institute. We have Ahmed Hashi, a global governance and policy analyst. We're joined momentarily by Professor Peter Kagwanja, who is the CEO of Africa Policy Institute. And just to, of course, extend my hearty welcome to our panelists this morning. Hashi is munching his samosa just to make sure that he's revving up his engine today to give us a critical analysis of what is happening in and around us, and of course also following the current events in Ukraine and the Russian war as well. But let's hear from us, the panelists. We begin with you, Irungu Houghton. We haven't seen you in a long time. I think in 2 weeks or 3 weeks so far. Where have you been? What's new?
So I've actually been in the country for most of that time. Previous 2 weeks I was in Senegal, where I realized that actually the culture of mandamano is actually not a national sport. It's actually a Pan-African sport. That, there is a gentleman by the name of Sonko. Who trends from time to time and of course causes a bit of chaos in the Nairobi region.
And there's no correlation with
but
the
there's
Sonko
no correlation. Here. They're not even brothers. One is Senegalese, the other one is Kenyan. And
the Sonko is a genuine name now. It's not a
no,
moniker there.
It's not a moniker. It's actually I think it's on his passport as well, because he was arrested and prosecuted using that name. But I think the other thing to note there really is that we live in a restless period where the political parties, particularly the opposition parties, are still finding their feet in terms of how to navigate these difficult, I guess, the shrinking space that is there in many countries.
Yes.
And Senegal is like Kenya. They've got an opposition that's coming up for election. They've got an opposition, and that opposition is not clear whether the space is open and free for them to engage as well. So they have mandamano every. I think it was while I was there were 2 protests. I think one on Tuesday, one on Monday, and one on Friday.
So that is almost every week?
Every week, yeah.
Monday, Friday, it's mandamano.
I don't know if they've sustained every week since I've gone, but definitely while I was there were some very intense protests.
Oh, fantastic. Dr. Hassan Kaneje, good to see you as well. Last week was a big day on, was it on Wednesday?
Yes,
yeah,
that's
you
right.
You can tell us more.
Yeah, no, we
missed you.
Yes, thanks. I missed you guys too. Now we held a symposium on climate change, migration, and security in the light of what has been happening, especially in the Horn of Africa.
Yes.
You know, it's not a theoretical concept for us in this region. I think it's a practical reality that we need to prepare for, because in terms of the early warning mechanisms have considerably increased, but we just don't understand why we don't prepare for some of these things when we actually know they're going to happen, especially the incident of droughts and famine that it has been facing our region today. But while on that, it looks like Lavrov was in town with some goodies. And maybe those of us from the North Rift are going to get tons of fertilizer. To an extent, you know, that is going, of course, to be helpful, is subject to debate. But I think to the extent that we're going to get fertilizer, I think it's good. We can plan for the next season.
Right. So Lavrov from here, he heads to South Africa, where I think there will be the meeting of foreign ministers from China as well. This is just as an advance team for the preparation of August BRICS summit in South Africa.
Yeah, and it's also kind of a pushback because Kuleba, the Ukrainian foreign minister, was, you know, on the continent not too long ago, is trying to push the agenda. Of course, backed mostly by Western countries. And I think Lavrov is also trying to undo some of that, but also try to push in terms of establishing an alternative centers of power, you know, to the existing order, and it's something that seems to be resonating. I think just yesterday, South Africa offered immunity to all those who are going to attend the BRICS summit in South Africa, which means, of course, they are not going to arrest Vladimir Putin. Not like it was going to happen anyway, but I think that formally says, South Africa is not going to play ball when it comes to arresting Vladimir Putin.
But they're obligated because of the Rome Statutes as it is. Now that will be a flagrant violation of the international law.
There is what ought to be and there is what is in international relations. Omar Hassan al-Bashir was in this country and we were supposed to have arrested him a couple of years ago.
We never did.
We never did, and we never will do. Something like that is just because of the realities of international relations.
So at the end of the day, it's all about your national interests. And I think also the history of South Africa and Russia acts back, way too back.
It's not just at the end of the day, even at the beginning of the day, it's about the national interest. Yes, so countries are going to make decisions based on that. But I think what also makes it complicated, especially with regard to the Rome Statute, is the leading countries and democracies in the world, they are not part of the Rome Statute. And of course that, even in cases that are really, really genuine, and like people sometimes need to be dealt with, it's going to be very hard to make a moral argument, especially when you're coming from Western capitals, when you're not part of a framework. Yeah.
Which has been raising the question of the efficacy of ICC, Houston, especially from the human rights perspective, that you're not all-encompassing. We have so many nations that are not actually listed or are not ratified on the Rome Statutes. We have the United States, we have Pakistan, we have, I think, Indonesia as well, and a list of other nations as well. So people are arguing, where do they really gain their mandate if it's not a global sort of a prosecution body that will actually go for anyone who is violating, human rights tenets that are the universal human rights law.
Yeah, no, Debal, I mean, I can understand the public cynicism with regard to the international justice system because, as we saw in the Amnesty International report a few months ago, there is too much doublespeak and double standards with regards to the accountability mechanisms for human rights. But I think the argument that because others do not observe the traffic law, we also can climb on the curb and displace pedestrians is probably not a good enough argument for those of us that believe in human rights, believe in democracy. I think what we have to do is to hold that international standard ourselves and demand that of others. But I think to say, because they're not doing it, we don't have to do it either, is actually a race to the bottom, not just for our countries, but even for the continents and the world that we serve. So I think that would be my context. I think the trip by Lavrov is interesting in the sense that there are a couple of things there. One is, we know that Kenya has been extremely consistent, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 votes in the United Nations in terms of support for Ukraine. We're one of the few African countries that have declared that territorial sovereignty is important, and also that that we will not accept the invasion of one country by another, which I think is really important. And that's possibly why he has come to visit. I think we do have an element of our foreign policy that's transactional, particularly driven by financial challenges. And, these, I guess, 34 tons of fertilizer that are heading to Haninja's hometown and elsewhere in the Republic will probably be, discussed in the context of increasing tea exports, which is what Kenya does quite a bit in terms of Russia. But ultimately, what is happening is a realignment of the world in terms of what we could say is a new Cold War that has as the battleground Ukraine, but essentially is a division of the world into those against and those for. And Kenya is critical for that. And I think the colleagues at Harambee House need to be aware that Africa is not an infant. We must not infantilize Africa at a time like this, because we are extremely powerful, not just in terms of our votes, but in terms of our bilateral and multilateral Pan-African policy. And the Russians know this. This is why they're coming. There is an Africa-Russia summit coming up in July, which follows the trip by Vladimir Putin to South Africa. I'm still waiting to see whether the premier of Gauteng, who mentioned at some point that if the national government does not take its international obligations seriously, they may do. So he may be arrested by provincial police as he goes in. But I get the point, Hassan, you're making about
Yes.
that there is real politics, and then there is I guess international policy standards. But I think it is important to say that even when Bashir came to Nairobi, he did not come through JKIA. He had to sneak in through Wilson Airport, and it was very humiliating, I think, for a head of state to be shuttled in, essentially walked to the dais by a cabinet secretary, and neither the Foreign Service nor the other aspects of the government knew that he was coming, because they had to keep it under wraps so that these terrible journalists that keep blowing up issues like this would not know that he's coming. I spoke to an ambassador at the time, just to finish off. I spoke to an ambassador at the time, one of our Kenyan ambassadors, and he was as shocked as I was to see Bashir walking to the dais at a time when we were promulgating our constitution. And of course, one of the constitutional articles was essentially that anything that we accede to or that we ratify in the international space will automatically become law within the Kenyan context. It is humiliating, I think, even for Putin to have to travel to South Africa in a context where he's not sure whether he's going to be arrested by a provincial officer or shunned by the press. These are not good times. He might choose to stay away.
Yeah, and we're given to understand also from European Hashi that Karim Khan is a wanted man in Russia, right? He's just here in Congo right now, trying to make some of investigations of the war crimes that are going on in Congo as well. But let's listen in from Ahmed Hashi. We had the VP from Sudan also here in the country, trying to negotiate and have some brokerage with the presidents all added to the gaiety of that occasion with President William Ruto.
Well, I think on the International Criminal Court, I've had a position now for about 15 years. I think it's a racist institution. Apart from being a racist institution, it is part of the Illuminati of global governance. These are the elites that have produced these systems to try and police us here in this continent. They're not going to police a guy called Netanyahu who's been bombing Gaza in the morning, noon, and night. You're not going to do that. Good point. Because it's very powerful. The Americans, you know that Israel is a state in the Middle East now, the 56th state of the United States, which has absolutely no cover for anything. It does anything it wants, when it wants, and how it wants. And here in Kenya, we're scared of them a lot because they provide our security forces and our intelligence. They're deeply rooted in our state system itself. So I think that the ICC is one of those places that we shouldn't waste any of our time because they don't have a police force, they don't have an army. The only thing they rely on the Security Council. The Security Council wants to throw nuclear weapons at each other, so maybe they should go to the UN and arrest the US and Russian ambassadors there, take them to the ICC for threatening global peace. Tabal, we can't speak the English language with its niceties here in Africa. We have to speak it with its brutality. And the reason is because our situation here is just outstanding. Because, if we sign an anti-gay bill in this country, we'll get sanctions. I'm not kidding. If we sign an anti-gay bill, this is what's happening in Uganda. Yeah. So I'm telling you that we have to wake up and smell the coffee, as they say in Boston. Because if we don't start bringing new economic ideas to our country, the government doesn't seem to have any economic ideas. I saw Mr. Thuge being vetted in Parliament, and he said, it worked in Singapore. I did a case study, unfortunately for Mr. Thuge, in class a long time ago, and they had no housing in Singapore. It's a small little island, 50 people. They had massive injection of capital from the US. The context and the economics are completely different. You have to get, there's something called voodoo economics. It's not about supply and demand. Here in our uneven economy, We need an economic transformation. We don't need to tinker with our economy. We need to transform it. And you could tell that the government of Ireland has absolutely lost its way. There's no grasp on its economic policy. Its political policy is gone. And nothing to say about the cultural point of view. Its cultural leader is the deputy president. He's the intellectual of the government. And we could see where that's going to take us.
All right, we shall hear from Professor Peter Kagwanja much later. For now, let's see what is fresh off the press this morning. And we begin with the Standard. This is what we are waking up to this morning. It's back to the streets, according to the Standard today. No talks, it says. Azimio leaders say they will not resume bipartisan talks because government is pushing the finance bill that will worsen cost of living, meaning demonstrations are the likely next step. This story continues on page 4 of the Standard. And also you have on the side but there Azimio resolutions, reject the finance bill in total. Mark Mwenje picked as the deputy minority whip of the National Assembly, replacing Sabina Chege. Finance bill as presently crafted must be withdrawn and replaced by a bill that appreciates Kenyans' suffering. Kenya Kwanza must agree that all Jubilee MPs who have defected have to resign and face by-elections. Suspend bipartisan talks until conditions are met. Those are the resolutions from Azimio, and you can see, of course, a picture there of Azimio leaders Peter Munya, George Wajakoya, Wycliffe Oparanya, Raila Odinga and Mwangi wa Iria yesterday during the parliamentary or the PG meeting. Also, KPLC blow as court holds 21 billion shillings tender. There is a past ghost return to haunt Ruto's empowerment. This is the probe that we had yesterday of the DPP, who is now the spy master, being vetted, and also the CBK governor nominee as well being vetted yesterday. 7 tribes scoop new Teacher Service Commission posts. That is tucked on page 8 of the Standard. Also, there are 10 reasons why housing fund is unconstitutional. 10 reasons why housing fund is unconstitutional. And of course, you can read all this analysis on page 14 and 15 by the constitutional lawyer Kibe Muigai there to get to know why the housing fund is unconstitutional. Teen charged with 19 Guyana murders. That is on the world page on 34 inside the Standard. And remember also you have the Enterprise magazine that comes in handy for you today. Why Kenyan farms fail to cross borders. And will Mourinho left Europe Cup for 6th time? That is a probably question that is tucked on page 48 of the Standard this morning. The Daily Nation. Big standoff over tax law is a splash today. And we have the flag reading tussle. Opposition leader also demand that all rebel MPs who defected be stripped of their seats. And we can see there was a fresh standoff, and a fresh standoff looms today between Raila Odinga's Azimio la Umoja and President William Ruto's Kenya Kwanza after a midnight ultimatum for the government to withdraw finance bill, which they say is laden with punitive proposals lapsed last night. That story continues on page 4. And you can see an insert here. Members of public service sector unions participate in a procession outside Parliament buildings in Nairobi on Monday to protest against tax proposals in the finance bill. On the sidebar, I'll seek dollar bonds to ease pressure on the shilling, says Tuge. CBK governor, should say, nominee, tells MPs he will encourage Kenyans in the diaspora to invest in the bond as a way of increasing inflows into the country. That story continues on page 10. And Maziwa ya Nyayo is back. Counties rush to revive Maziwa ya Nyayo. Introduction of school milk programs by more than a dozen county governments has revived memories of the free Nyayo milk of the 1980s and 1990s. That story continues on page 8 of the Daily Nation. Parenting Pullard magazine is also inside the Daily Nation today. And burdened in retirement. A new survey has revealed that the burden senior citizens continue to carry in their sunset years at a time when they will be expected to rest after decades of toil, as the country's dire unemployment rate leaves energetic youth and the children, in some cases, relying on their parents' meager pensions to survive. You can follow the story on page 7 of the Daily Nation this morning. I have no apologies, Haji taken to task of the withdrawal of court cases. This is on page 10. And employ teachers on contract to fix biting shortage. That is what the senators are suggesting. This story continues on page 12 of the Daily Nation. The Star. Raila wants tax bill out, makes fresh demands. Sabina Chege kicked out. Mark Mwenje named Deputy Minority Whip for Azimio. This continues on page 4 and 5 of the Star this morning. And also there's a bill, the intersex bill, that wants schools to have gender-neutral uniforms and toilets. This is on page 6 of the Star this morning. This is a bill that has been drafted by Kenya Human Rights Commission. The intersex bill wants schools to have gender-neutral uniforms and toilets. That is on page 6 of the Star this morning. And Haji refuses to reveal net worth. Thuge worth 450 million shillings, and also over 101,000 teachers required to address shortage. That is according to TSC. And City Hall to charge 3,000 shillings for yellow fever vaccine from July. People Daily up next. How matatu tax will hurt Kenyans. Hidden in plain sight, advanced tax on passenger vehicles will raise cost of doing businesses for PSVs, taxis, and trucks. This will hurt workers too, as they will pay more if a finance bill is passed. Azimio pledges to fight against the proposals. You have this story continuing on page 4 and 5 of the People Daily this morning. Haji Thuge voted for NIS Central Bank jobs. That continues on page 6 and 14 of the People Daily this morning. All set for first Madaraka Day, fit ad under Ruto. And that is on page 7. Big face-off in tonight's Europa League finals. All that is tucked away on the back page of the People Daily. Taifa Leo, Rais Msafiri. That is a splash. Kiongozi wa nchi amefanya ziara 29 nje ya Kenya katika muda wa miezi 8 pekee akiwa madarakani. That is a splash today, Rais Msafiri. And you have Raila atoa sharti jipya kwa serikali, ajitetea vikali mbele ya wabunge. And you have also an illustration of how the president has been globetrotting, and that is tucked away on page 2 of Taifa Leo this morning. Let's buckle down to some business. South Sudan is asking Ruto to end Joho's port monopoly. Autoport Limited has been handling bulk of Juba's imports. Kir says shift will ensure a smooth flow of goods. And we have a story of Moses Kuria pick for KEB's chair caught up in 278 million shillings unexplained wealth case. Some of Dr. Kinyua's frozen property listed here. EACC says his net salary for the period was 11.6 million shillings. Land, 3 parcels of land in Rero at a figure of 95 million shillings. We have 5 parcels of land in Nairobi and Kajiado, 68.8 million shillings. And also 1 parcel in Laikipia that costs 18 million shillings. Toyota Prado, undisclosed amount. Cash, 12.5 million shillings, and cash in yuan denomination there, 0.3 million shillings. We can convert that in yuan. And that is what the Business Daily has here. Read all about it inside the Business Daily. Thuge plans local dollar bond to ease pressure on shilling. DTB Group profits jump 11% on large loan book. And you can read all about Sun King getting 18 billion shillings to fund solar buyers. All that in the Business Daily. In Uganda, and also this will pique the interest of our panelists this morning, Spy Chief is warning of new DR Congo war. Uganda's spy master has placed intelligence and security agencies in districts bordering the Democratic Republic of Congo on high alert, warning that an outbreak of war likely to topple one or two governments is imminent. This is a story to want to follow on page 4 of the Daily Monitor this morning. And Ministry of Tourism joined top 100 mid-sized companies survey. You can read all about it also in the Daily Monitor. Why is the West mad at Uganda over anti-gay law? Why is the West mad at Uganda over anti-gay law? That is on Newsbeat inside the Daily Monitor in Uganda. In Tanzania, diaspora special status plan to be finalized by December. That is what the Citizen is writing about here. You can read all about it when you grab a copy. In Rwanda, Kayishema's impending transfer from South Africa is explained. Kayishema is accused of playing a pivotal role in the killings of close to 2,000 Tutsis in 1994. And this story is tucked on page 4, page 3 of the New Times. ICT use in education is our priority. This is what Minister Irere is saying. You can read all about it inside the New Times. Rainwater harvesting transforms livelihoods in volcanic communities. All that tucked away inside the New Times. Let's see what the China Daily is saying. And the first civilian astronaut, of course, will also be taking a tour in the Space Cruise Meet-in Station. 6 astronauts scheduled to stay together for about 5 days to complete joint task. And that continues in the China Daily. Defense chief to attend key security dialogue. He says the attendance of the China's defense minister at Shangri dialogue in Singapore will be vital to expand China's vision on global and regional stability. This is what experts are saying here. Also, there's a clash in Kosovo. It jumped to page 2 there. Let me just go back and show you where we are. The clash there in Kosovo. You can read about it inside the China Daily this morning. The East African Al-Shabaab attack. Uganda 6 answer. We shall be discussing about this attack as well. Officials described as quote-unquote sad and unfortunate news of deadly ambush in Somali base. And this story continues on page 6 of the East African this week. Irresistible rise of Dar es Salaam port. Tanzania returns from 357 million shillings expansion project as facility efficiency improves. Also, Ruto Uhuru Rao, chaos looms large, fears of business, logistics disruption as a mayor leader threatens mass action. The story continues on page 5 of the East African this week. Are we winning or losing? That is a probing question that we have the cartoonist asking here. That is Stano. And the Kenya, of course, will be celebrating its independence. Kenya at 60. We turned 60 this year. Are we losing or are we winning? Let me hear from Peter Kagwanja. Good morning. Good to see you.
Good morning. Good morning. Are we winning or losing? I think we are winning. Kenya is still a work in progress. That we must accept. Depending on who is counting, Kenya is older than me or younger than me.